All right, guys, this is Jesse. Welcome back to Iowa Audio Review. And tonight, we're going to have to do it a little bit differently because these speakers are just too darn big to put up on the desk. So they're just going to have to stay on the floor where they're at. And we'll talk about them and move around them, just kind of where they sit. And later, for the look inside portion of the video, I'll throw it on that dolly on its back and we can kind of pop some of the drivers out and take a look inside. But for now, we'll just start with the outside, the obvious part. They're finally done. I had some trial and error along the way, trying different finishes and stuff. And obviously the most noticeable thing is the color. And hold on, let me grab the color tag. And what I landed up with was this Rushing Red from Valspar. I tried some other stuff, starting with I tried just a basic simulated wood vinyl wrap, and it looked good until you get kind of close and you see, if you bump the edges, and I probably could have let it go, but it just wasn't good enough for me. I think since they're big speakers, handling them and moving them around, if you bump the edges and stuff, the vinyl would kind of peel. So I took that vinyl off, and then I got a different vinyl, a little bit higher quality vinyl, simulated wood vinyl, whatever. And then I taped them off and coated them with a tacky, spray adhesive tape underneath, and then applied the vinyl. And then, and it did stick a lot better, but it's still in, the very corners, and stuff, if you were to bump them and stuff, and even, manufacturer speakers are the same way, you can kind of get the vinyl to kind of start peeling back, and I didn't want to deal with that with these. So I decided, like with the Pioneer CS410, just to go with a good old interior latex base house paint, because it's not super expensive, even for the better stuff. This is on the CS410s, it was just some white paint I had around. For these, I actually went up and got the better, I don't remember what it's called, but it's the better quality Valspar latex paint. And what I like about it is there is a huge selection of colors to pick from. Pretty much whatever color you want. It's easy to apply. You can get it in various forms, from eggshell, satin, semi-gloss, gloss, high gloss, whatever. And it's durable. You put a couple coats on, something rubs up against it, it pretty much wipes off, or you spill something on it, it wipes off. It's such a durable paint, and it's made to be durable. So it actually, to me anyway, it works out quite well to cover speakers, just because, at least for me anyway, I'm always messing with my speakers, moving them around, hooking them up, unhooking them, whatever. And whether you're leaving handprints on them, or company comes over and sets something on them, or the kids spill something on them, or writes on them with a crayon, this paint can deal with all that, and you can just wipe it off. You can even scrub it off with a little bit of cleaner or something, and it'll be fine. So for the cost to performance to what you get, the interior house paint, and this is just the satin, so it's not glossy, it's not quite matte, but the satin seems to me to be the best, where it's not gloss, but it's not matte, but yet it's still durable and cleanable. And I had another color. I was trying to get very maroon, dark red, and the other one I had mixed it for me. I did half of one speaker, and it ended up just looking, kind of brown. In certain lighting, it would look kind of a dark red, but then other darker lighting, it just looked brown. So I ended up switching it out. I went to this Rushing Red, and I didn't like it at first, but it kind of grows on you. And it's not that big of a deal. You could easily tape these off and just paint them some other color if you wanted to. But yeah, that's where we landed on the external. Is this? I wanted to do something different. I didn't just want them to be wood. I'm tired of just wood speakers. So I kind of wanted to go somewhere else. And I feel, if you're going to put these big speakers in your room, why not make them, I don't know, like an occasion, draw a little bit of attention to them. They look a little brighter red on camera than they do in real life. So, but whatever. They're big, beautiful speakers, and I wanted to kind of give them something to make them unique. Same thing with the gray grills. I thought the gray, I already had some gray fabric around. I didn't have enough black to do these large grills, but I did have enough gray, and I felt the gray actually meshed well with the reddish color, so just went with that, and I think I like it. It's a little bit different. It's not too crazy, but it's a little bit different, so I went with it. Oh, let me stand up. I'll take a look. I'll move up here. I'll pop the grill off this one. The grills were completely missing on these, so I just went off of the thickness of the horn baffle here. It's a 3/4 inch thick baffle, so I just got some 3/4 inch thick MDF and cut out a frame, and then cut out some, cut out a few spots to clear the drivers. And that's pretty much it. And the nice thing about wood frames, you just stretch the cloth over and staple it along. And pretty easy. Much easier than doing the tacky glue. And then underneath, I think JBL does it, but instead of just a matte black front, I did have some of this. It's pretty thick, high quality carbon fiber looking vinyl. And I had just enough to do the front on each one. And I thought that looked pretty neat other than just the plain matte black. I thought with the covers on in the red and, I didn't talk about, I cut out these, don't tell the wife I borrowed her Cricut machine and cut out these shiny metal looking Kenwood badges, since I could not find any badges online anywhere that suited this era at all. Almost all the Kenwood stuff as far as stickers online were more like car audio. So I just cut these out myself with her Cricut, and they originally were down here. And instead of putting them down there again, I put them up here above the horn. So even when the covers are on, they're kind of there. Not as noticeable, but when you do notice them, they are kind of a nice, they have a nice kind of chrome shine to them. It's a brushed metal looking vinyl. But anyway, on the fascia, I went with this carbon fiber looking thing. Is it just kind of, I don't know, makes them look a little bit more modern, I guess. Or just gives them a little bit more, I don't know, appealing to look at, and then just a plain black front. And then there's the two 12-inch woofers. These I had to put new dust caps on. In the previous video, you probably seen the dust caps on these were in pretty bad shape. Luckily, these don't have foam surrounds. It's a treated fabric surround, which will last forever. It'll last longer than these paper cones. I almost applied some of the, I think Parts Express or Dayton makes it. It's called the Wet Look. It's a treatment they have for paper cone woofers. It gives them that shiny black look. I was going to apply that, but I decided after just using a clean paintbrush and just slowly dusting over these over and over, and then using just a damp rag to clean the surrounds, they cleaned up good enough just to leave them alone. If they're good enough, it's kind of one of those things, just stop before you mess them up and just leave them alone. They're not perfect, but they're way better than they were. And then I applied also new gasket around the edges. The other gaskets were all rotted and peeling. And then even the metal baskets were corroding. So I cleaned those up and I left them silver on the edges just to add a little bit of touch to kind of draw your eye to the woofer. Almost kind of like those chrome beauty rings they used to put on car rims back in the day. Kind of just a little bit of just a little something to draw your eye to them. Just a little shine, or, Underneath here, I didn't have any stands for these. And, you could put them on the floor, but even these, they're not obviously not a tall format, so they need to be up off the floor to get them up. At least kind of get the tweeter and the horn closer to ear level. So I just took some extra 2x4s I had and made these 2x4 stands. I wanted something robust and heavy duty, because these speakers, after all the bracing and stuff has been done to them, they've gained some weight. They're pretty heavy. So I wanted a nice robust stand. So I just made some nice stands out of 2x4s and painted them black to kind of get them up off the floor, and something that's, sturdy. Not much going on there. It's just a stand, get them up off the floor. And then The original compression tweeters were completely toast. I took them apart down to the voice coil, and the wires that ran from the actual input leads to the voice coils were completely severed and burnt off. They were toast. And I looked everywhere. I could not find any sort of replacement. I even tried to delicately solder the leads back to the voice coil and everything, and it's just the wire that actually ran from the leads to the voice coil and those little tweeters was like a human hair, and just couldn't get it done. And which is whatever. It's not like they were great tweeters anyway. And to kind of stick with the horn, style we got going here, I went with a more horn-loaded tweeter. This is a GRS 520, I believe. When we pop it out, we'll see. It's just a basic, I think, I want to say $10 or $15 tweeter, but it performs quite well. And I just went with this since the mid is handling a lot. The mid horn is handling a lot of the mids and pretty fairly high. This tweeter has a pretty easy job, so I felt a pretty basic tweeter should be able to handle. And it does. It handles it great. It has very little to do. I don't know if it's an improvement because the original compression tweeters on both of them were shot when I got these. So I can't really say, but judging by the quality of those other ones and everything, I'm going to guess these are most likely an improvement over the original tweeter. And then the star of the show with this massive mid horn. I don't know if it's massive, but for these it's massive. I think it's about a foot across and about 4 or 5 inches tall. And I don't know the frequency range it covers. I want to say it's about 1,500 to 5,000 or 7,000. I'm not exactly sure. When I rebuilt the crossovers, I wrote it down somewhere, but I forgot actually. But they set it up so some of the lower vocals, you're going to get some vocals out of the 12s, but it seems like the majority of the vocals all come out this horn. So that will have to do with what I have to say about these things' sound signature later on. But probably like most horn speakers, one of the first things you notice when you start listening to music on these is the horns come right at you. If you've ever heard a horn speaker before, you could listen to these blind and know they're horn speakers. So, and the horns are kind of, to me, they're one of those things you either like them or you don't, I guess, kind of. These are kind of my first like full horn, not just like a horn loader tweeter, but an actual like horn driver speaker. And I guess I take that back. It's not either you like them or you don't. I would recommend them depending on what kind of music you like to listen to and kind of maybe how loud you like to listen to it. We'll get into more of that later. But yeah, the massive horn, I checked. A lot of people said these horns look like a lot of the ones out of the realistic Mach 1s or something like that. They also had a big horn. It's similar, but it's not the same horn. And then you got your 2 portholes up front here. The only downside is these look impressive because they're big. They're fairly big, but you got 2 12-inch woofers here. But realistically, not to refer back to the Mach 1s, these 2 12s to get deep and do their job need a much larger cabinet than this. Probably 2 or 3 times this. This is actually a really small cabinet for 2 12-inch woofers. Spoiler alert for later, I think what I've measured these, they only get down to about, I think, 50 or 60 hertz. Just because it's just not enough volume for 2 12-inch woofers. Even with ports, it's just not enough. I think maybe through the ports they get a little bit lower, but I think for these speakers to actually, or for these 12-inch woofers to really stretch their legs, they would need to be in a cabinet almost twice as big. But whatever. I mean, they get too big, then there's nowhere to put them in the house. These things are already huge the way they are. And what I like about these and why I bought them is because maybe some of like the Kenwood fans out there have seen these in the past, but I've ventured through lots of forums and Pinterest and all these other audio places, and I'd never come across these Kenwood speakers. They're the Kenwood MV-7s, by the way. so I just had to get them. I mean, and once you dig into them, they're from 1991. The kind of the odd thing about them, from what I could find, is they were never sold in retail stores. They were only sold on U.S. military PX bases. So to be brought into the rest of the world or whatever, I think a soldier or somebody in the military would have had to have purchased these from a PX at some point. This model, from what I can tell, came out in '91. And then from there they would have been released into the wild and sold on to other people. But these were, as far as I know, were never sold in retail stores, just U.S. military bases, which I'm not sure why. I don't know. It is what it is. And I believe there was a smaller version. There was an MV-5, which it was pretty much the same thing, but it had two 10s. And then there was a bigger version, which is the MV-9, which was exactly like these, but it had four 12-inch woofers. And I would probably say those are even more rare. There's not even many pictures, really, of any of these online. They were only made for a couple of years. I think the later years, I think in either 92 or 93, I can't find rock solid proof of any of this, but the ports got a plastic square coupler over it that kind of gave a little more style on both ports. And then down here, they added basically a potentiometer to, I think, attenuate the mid-range, because the mid-range can be a bit bright because it's a horn. And I guarantee the sensitivity of this is still higher than the tweeter or the two 12-inch woofers combined. It's a very efficient horn. It's a very noticeable horn. But yeah, overall, I've seen a lot of Kenwood speakers. I'd never seen these. I found them at a pawn shop, just beat to crap. And they're big, and they were going to be a lot of work, but I just decided I couldn't let them go. I think I paid $120 for them. The guy at the pawn shop wouldn't let them go any less than that. And I don't even think they were worth that, the shape they were in when I got them. But you just don't see them every day. It's just a speaker I couldn't let go to waste. It looked like somebody was using them as like a PA speaker or a DJ speaker. They were just so beat up. Looked like they'd been in and out of a truck or a van over and over. It's just so rough. They obviously were used for partying and stuff. And no, that had to end. I had to bring these home. I had to clean them up, get them back to good. And hopefully, I kind of want to keep them, but they're just big, and I have other big speakers too I need to review, so I will enjoy them a little bit now that they're done, but they will be for sale, and hopefully they will make someone else that likes big old speakers happy. But anyway, I'm going to get them, well, I don't know, let's see if we can get around back. There's not much going on in the back. I sanded and repainted the backs because they were made out of a pretty cheap chipboard. Once I got into them, you could tell these speakers were not really high quality. The only good thing is the chipboard was a decent thickness, so sanding them, and then there's probably about 5 coats of black paint on here. I really wanted to seal up that chipboard to protect it from moisture, because moisture just destroys chipboard, and these had already been exposed to a lot of moisture. And sanding them, and just tons of body work, because all these edges were so beat up. The corners were beat down. Almost all these corners are either I can't remember the stuff. It's something called rock hard. It's like a powder. You add water to it, and it literally turns into like freaking limestone. Great stuff. I'll link it in the description. And like there was an edge on one of these where there's a huge, in one last video you can see there's a huge chunk taken out of one of these back corners, and I had to use that rock hard. And initially I put the rock hard in there and filled it all in and started sanding it, and the whole chunk just broke out and it just didn't adhere to the wood. So I mixed up a new batch and just added a little bit of wood glue to the rock hard powder, and then you add some water to it. I just added a little bit of wood glue to it and mixed it in, and then applied it on there and let it dry, and that stuff was not coming off. It was on there. And then from there, all I had to do was just sand it smooth back to get my right angle, my good shape back on there. And I did that on all the big spots that were missing big chunks, and then all the smaller spots along these edges on top and the corners, I just used the premix Bondo, just glob bunch on there, sand it down, and try to get my, get the nice corner back. That was probably the most work. It was these were just so beat up on around the edges, and trying to get all those edges back nice and square was probably the most work. I did keep the original spring terminals, the MV-7 spring terminals. Yep. The 550 watts, that's no way that's going to happen. You put 550 watts in these things, they will fry. I would say max maybe 200 watts, like 200 watts RMS, if that. These speakers are quite efficient, so even 100 to 150 watts, these things are going to be very loud. My Marantz receiver is only 80 watts, and I maybe turn it up a little more than halfway, and it's rocking the house. These things are quite efficient. They don't list efficiency, but I'm going to guess the efficiency on these things is probably north of 90 dB per 1 watt. 8 ohm, yeah. And then these still work. You can use these if you want. They're still connected. The crossover plate's still on there. But I did add a actual 5-way binding post terminal cup to use. And you'll see there's wires that run from this up to the crossovers I rebuilt. So you can't use both at the same time, but you can use one or the other if you want. And I do have some vinyl decals made up that like warnings to say not to use both, just use one. And then like this Pioneer CS 410s, I have some laminated badges to put up here in the corner stating the work that's been done and who did it, yada, 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 and contact info for down the road. So we'll kind of just move around them here. And then this is just bare metal. I cleaned it down too, but after I cleaned it down to a bare metal, I put a, excuse me, just a little bit of oil and rubbed them down a little bit, just kind of help protect the metal so they won't rust. Because I tried them that way, and I just, leaving them that silver ring around the outside of the woofer just adds a nice touch. And it also, to me, works well with the silver Kenwood logo. So, and then this one is pretty much the same. All 4 woofers really needed a lot of work, but they cleaned up pretty darn good. Like I said, I didn't want to mess with them too much because then you can actually just start causing more problems. And then just to add my little touch, the waveguide on the dome in there was black. And when I took these completely apart, pulled the whole horn off, everything, and there is some aluminum pitting and stuff, and I sanded them down a little bit. I didn't want to get too aggressive with them. I just tried to smooth them up a little bit and coated the horns with a new, about 3-4 coats of good paint. So they're nice and black again. And then the wave, I took everything down to the voice coil, pulled the diaphragm, everything out of the driver for the mid horn, checked it, cleaned it. And then the waveguide is a separate piece in there. I painted it yellow, which is my Iowa Audio thing, which if you're not looking too close, it's not very noticeable. Only when you shine the light, kind of look down in there, you can kind of see the yellow back in there. Excuse me, it's really dry down here. Yeah, I think we'll move on. We'll get them on this dolly here on their back, and we'll start pulling some of the drivers out, and we can take a look inside and see what I did inside. Okay, got them off the stand on their back on this dolly. We start pulling the drivers out and have a look inside. Alright, we'll start with the tweeter here. I already moved all the screws this time ahead of time, so ready to start pulling them out. Yep, I was right. Oh, I thought it was a Juris. Nope, it's a little bit better. It's the Goldwood GT520. Pure silk dome tweeter. I think these are, like I said, maybe $15. And they're fairly cheap, and they do perform fairly well. And I do, depending on the application, I do like the horn-loaded front plate, whatever you want to call it. And since they had such a large front plate, I didn't have to modify this hole. The front plate was large enough. I couldn't use the original holes because it didn't line up exactly, but they were large enough I could just create new holes and not have to make the original hole any bigger. Some of the other tweeters I looked at ended up not working out because they were just too small. This one actually had a large enough faceplate where it would work with the original hole. We'll move into woofer here. And yeah, no tripod. You're going to have to deal with the camera flopping around and stuff as I hold it and try to do this with one hand, because I don't have anybody to help me do this. Unhook the woofer, and these are just typical, you know, really nothing super fancy, just typical 12-inch woofers. I mean, they have a decent sized motor, magnet, whatever you want to call them. But yeah, I mean, nothing super special, just a decent 12-inch woofer. Going inside, we'll get to the crossovers in a second. Decent woofer, woofer's out. Not a whole lot to explain there. I already went over all the stuff that was replaced. We'll move on to the mid-horn. These are quite deep. Let me set that up here so I can carefully bring that out. I kept all the original wiring, and it's not the heaviest gauge, but it's not bad either. But yeah, very large, very deep throat mid-horn. And then as you can see, there's the crossover. If you want to know what the crossovers originally looked like, I posted pictures of them on my Iowa Audio Instagram and Iowa Audio Facebook. But as you can see, let me see if I can get this down in there. Prop this up maybe. But on this lower board here is for the mid-horn. This bank of resistors, I believe, is an L pad to bring the sensitivity of it down. Only thing I replaced on the mid board was the cap and the inductor. I got rid of the iron core inductor and got this nice 18 gauge air core inductor and these I don't remember the brand, Audiodyne, I think, poly or film audio grade cap on there. And then up here on the tweeter, if I can get this a little closer, get right down in there for you guys. On, if I get some of the wires out of the way, got this big cap right here. I believe goes with the tweeter or the, I don't know, tweeter woofer. But on the tweeter, this upper board has the components for the tweeter and the woofer. I replaced the caps with more of these Audine, made in Germany, audio grade caps. Actually, this one over here is not Audine, it's a different brand, this one. The wires are just in the way. Let me see if I can get a different angle here. But yeah. Replace the caps, the old Elna caps, electrolytic caps with these audio grade caps. And then right here, it's kind of tucked in there, but originally there was a really small ferrite bobbin inductor. I replaced that with, I wanted to go with an 18 gauge, but it was too big, so I just went with a 20 gauge air core inductor in here for the tweeter. I believe this inductor, resistor, and cap, I think is for the tweeter, and then the only inductor, iron core inductor I kept was for the woofers, which is right here, because it's already a decent gauge wire. And I believe these two are for the woofer. And then there also is a protection relay right here, overpower protection relay. So if you were to overpower these and they shut off, you can, I believe, come in here and stick a pin in that red hole and reset the relay, or not relay, it's like a breaker or protection circuit for them. Fairly big improvement. I mean, I replaced most of the components. Anything I didn't replace, I tested with my DATS V3, which allows me to test in circuit. And everything else, even the original caps, everything all tested fine. But a lot of these other caps, you know, all these caps and inductors in here really didn't cost that much. Maybe 20 bucks, 20, 30 bucks for everything. I think the most expensive inductors was the larger inductor for the mid. But these caps are only a couple bucks each. There's, you know, it's not crazy. So updating the crossovers wasn't a huge deal. And I did think about upgrading the wire, but the actual pin hole that goes through the wire, where you'd feed the wire through the PCB board to solder it, the hole is really small. So going up to like a 16 or 14 gauge wire just wasn't possible without trying to maybe drill the hole larger in the PCB board, and I just didn't want to mess with the PCB board. So I just left all the original wiring, which is not bad. It's decent size, and it's copper wiring, so not bad. And then, as you can tell, a lot more acoustic damping than they originally had. Before, they just had kind of one piece draped across the side and the bottom. I took a new piece and draped it all the way across the bottom, over the other side, up the other side. I'm not going to take them completely apart, but what's on this side is completely the same on the other side. And then I added some more up here, all the way up by the ports. Not above the ports, but obviously there's another piece right here. And then crossovers are here. Then you can see right here above the mid horn, there's another piece there. And just kind of acoustic damping all the way around, and then even on the back behind the woofers, some more back here. And then the main thing to help, these are fairly large cabinets without any bracing. I basically, they had this brace here in the middle between the two woofers, but that was it. So these almost had kind of an odd boominess to them because the cabinets weren't braced enough, not nearly enough for 12-inch woofers. So this brace here, and then there's another brace here, and then same thing, basically all the way around the woofers is bracing to really stiffen this up around the woofers. And then up in the top, right here, let me switch hands here. Add another brace here for the top board, another brace over here for the other top board, if it will focus. Right here, another brace. So basically, on the inside of these, instead of running scaffolding all over the place, I wanted to put it around the woofers, because this area around the woofers, around the 12s, I wanted to be very firm and stiff. But as far as running a brace all the way from the top of these things all the way to the bottom, I didn't want these long sticks going back and forth. So instead, these braces up here, it's just like a 1 inch by 3/4 inch or 1 inch by 1/2 inch, just a piece of scrap board, and it's glued along this wall to help firm up that wall. And then obviously putting a lot of acoustic, damping on those as well. And it seems to have paid off. The base is that odd cabinet resonance boominess, and kind of where the cabinet almost kind of starts to become a speaker because it vibrates so much, is pretty much gone. Yeah, you could do better bracing, but like I've said in other videos, with these cheap speakers, if you start adding a ton of bracing, the more bracing and stuff you put in there, you're displacing volume. And if you keep adding tons of bracing and stuff, you lose volume, which can be a problem. And then in the corners, the particle board, from being wet and just humidity in Iowa, hot and cold, dry and damp, the corners of the cabinets were all just starting to come apart, So after sanding them and everything on the inside, I went through probably 2 or 3 times and just kept re-gluing all the edges to make sure they pretty much never come apart ever again. And then all these braces are just completely slathered with tons of wood glue to make sure they never come off. These cabinets have probably gained several pounds, and they're a lot stiffer than they used to be, which is what I wanted. And without much effort, because it's just scrap wood. It's on the inside, nobody's ever gonna see it. It's just scrap wood, just chunks of wood that run, front to back or side to side to stiffen up some edges. So that's what happened on the inside. There's the lower terminal cup right there. Those wires just run up and connect to the main terminals, the spring terminals up here. Is all. It's just jumpered off of them. That's why you can't use them at the same time. Like I said, hopefully the spring terminals just never get used again. I just left them there because I wanted to keep the original terminal cup that has the name and information, everything of these. And you never know. Somebody has an old stereo, spring terminals. They want to use them with just some bare wire, whatever. You never know what people are going to do. All I can do is put a warning sticker on there saying not to use both terminals at the same time. So, yeah. How about we get them put back together and measure them? Okay, got everything set up. Put the microphone in my listening position at about where my ears would be, roughly. Got speakers set up where I want them at a modest volume, and did a sweep, and this is the default response I got. And it's not bad. I mean, it gets a bit up and down right here through the upper mid bands into the treble. That's that mid horn. You can see it is quite a few decibels over, and then even the tweeter is, coming back down, especially in the 20 kilohertz, which really beyond about here, 15, kilohertz plus is not super big a deal because most of us can't hear it. Very few adults can hear the 20 kilohertz anymore. Usually, you're lucky if you can hear over 15 by the time you're in your 30s. So, this doesn't worry me as much. This hump here, where the mid horn is the horns in these, like many other horn speakers, tend to be a bit aggressive. They're very efficient. And then these are mid horns, so a lot of the vocals come through the mid horns, so them vocals come right at you, and they are very powerful. And in some music with the stock, tune here, no EQing, it's really impressive. Even it gets a bit shouty. Actually, not a bit. It can get quite shouty if you turn it up too much. It'll really come at you. But things that are, whether they're male or female, the vocals on these can be very impressive, as long as you don't crank them up too much with this curve. You can see the woofers are really stretched and even to get down to 40 hertz. I would say 50 at the lowest. But through here in the lower end's not too bad. But once you get into this mid horn area, just all over the place. And then you get to the tweeter about right here, and it just falls off. $75 investment in a calibrated mic and some free software will do more than any graphic EQ, component graphic EQ. This is after 5 minutes of tinkering. Basically, this is what I got. This is the original measurement. And then coming into equalizer APO, like I said, these lower frequencies that these speakers, even though they're big, these speakers cannot reproduce. Get rid of them. These speakers have no business even trying to reproduce those lower frequencies. And then right around here, 30 hertz to 40 hertz. I only brought 30 hertz down 10 dB because you can see how it adjusts your curve here. And pulling this down more didn't really help the below 50. I mean, I could try to push this up, but it becomes a very like a forced artificial low bass. And I'm trying to get just more of a natural roll off. And really, 50 hertz is fairly low unless you're listening to some sort of like digital synthesized music. If you're listening to classic rock and music that consists of real instruments, you really only need to get down to about 40 hertz. So 50 is not terribly bad. Could these benefit maybe from a powered sub just for that touch that bottom end? Sure, why not? But I don't think that's what these speakers are designed for. I think these speakers are designed to just blow your freaking head off. But I'm trying to tame them and make them into a little more a big civilized speaker. Through the lower bass region, we left it flat. At 100, we had a bit of a dip, so I pulled that up. At 200, had a bit of a peak, so I pulled that down 3 dB. And then again at 300, had a bit of a peak, so I pulled it down. And then the whole mid-range area here, you can see I kind of pulled this whole range down, and then at about 1.5 kilohertz. I had to pull that down 10 dB. There must be some sort of peak in the, I don't know if it's the upper end of the woofers or the lower end of the mid horn. There was just a terrible peak there. Let's see if we can, right here. Just under 2K, there's this big old peak. This peak I was able to pull down pretty easily, but this peak, as I pushed that up, pulled this down a little bit, I pulled that down a little bit, this, and then that up. A lot of it flattened out, but this one stayed, so I really had to pull that one down quite a bit. And then even the 15 to 20K, I pulled that up, 5 dB. I could go 6. I don't like to go more than 10. I mean, you can, but like this 1.6 kilohertz, I had that big peak. I had to pull it down 10 dB just to even bring it down, and it flattened it out. I did -3, -6, and it was really fighting it. And then at -10, it chopped that sucker off. And then this really smoothed out. Well, like once I got rid of this peak, the rest of it seemed to smooth out pretty easily. I could maybe try to push this up a little bit, but I felt this was a pretty good over the original. Let's do an overlay. There's the overlay. Mostly what I did is I brought this hump down a little bit. I pushed that up a little bit, but this hump right here through the mid horn, and that's when you're listening to, well, really any music where the mids come through and they would just, come at you and violate your ears. And that's when you're like, ooh, these speakers are just too harsh. Pulling that down, not just pulling down, but flattening that out through the mid horn. Like this with the tweeter, even doing a +5 dB, it only brought it up a little bit. But then again, you're not going to really hear much of it. What I wanted to flatten out is really up to about 10K, and I was able to do that. And when I listened to them with this EQ, they are way more, way less fatiguing. With the default of this, oh man, you can't turn them up very loud. You got to be careful what you listen to. They're really only good for vocals, and even then you got to be careful because they wouldn't take much and they get shouty and aggressive with your ears, and then the fatigue comes in and then they're just not enjoyable anymore. And so putting in this EQ, chopping all this out, getting that mid horn under control, and I could have spent a lot more money, possibly a lot more money and time trying to get that mid horn under control with crossover components. Completely rebuilding the crossover for these with L pads, notch filters, changing the crossover points. I probably could have achieved this with physical parts with crossovers. And it probably would actually sound a little better that way. But with this, the calibrated microphone and the software, just a little bit of tuning with some EQ, I was able to, grab them mid-range or the mid-horn that was just out of control and yelling at me, grab that sucker and pull them down, get them under control, and it makes a noticeable difference when you go from something like this to something like this. And it's a tough spot to be because a lot of people say measurements and all this stuff doesn't matter. Just find the gear and equipment you like or whatever. And it's weird that it seems like for some reason using an EQ has become blasphemy. You just need to listen to it the way it is on your speakers, and if it's not right, you need to get different gear. And maybe in some cases, yes, but in a lot of cases, the gear you have with a little bit of EQing can go a long way. The trick is nowadays we can get technology that's not that expensive, like a calibrated microphone, to kind of help us see what we're hearing. And when I see this, it reflects exactly what I thought I was hearing. This highs through the mid horn is exactly what I felt like these horns were doing to my ears. It's sometimes they're just so loud and peaky and shouty and shrill. And if you have a receiver that has bass, mid, and treble, you could pull your mid down a little bit, and that might help. Or if you have a graphic EQ, physical component graphic EQ, you could and get it fairly pleasing to your ear. But with the way things work today, a decent component EQ could be well over $100. When the calibrated mic I use is $75, and the software is free, and it takes to do all this maybe takes 10 minutes, and so much better. And when I go and listen to songs, I can flip this EQ on and off. That's when this is black, it's off. You see the EQ's gone. I can turn this on and it's back, on and off, and I can instantly hear the difference. And I've done this before on other speakers, and the way they were originally ended up sounding better than after I flattened them out. Some speakers, just their default response isn't that great, but it is a characteristic to the way they sound, and sometimes it is very enjoyable, and you might just want to leave it that way, which is fine. But other speakers that just feel like they're trying to blow your head off or stab you in the ears, you need to get a hold of them and reel them in and flatten them out a little bit. And sometimes you can turn, a speaker that doesn't perform that well into something that's a whole different animal with a little bit of EQing. So I'm done ranting about the measurements. I know a lot of things are moving more towards measurements in the audio industry, which is fine. Measurements can help us fix and resolve issues we're having, but measurements don't always mean everything. Sometimes if you dislike a speaker the way it sounds, whether the measure's good or not, that's all that matters. Listen to what you like. So let me put all this away. We'll back her up. We'll go through a few tunes, and then we'll call it a night.
Guys, we gotta do the sound demo.
All right, I got everything set up. We're going to go through just a few tracks. Only on the first track, I'm going to flip back and forth through the EQ so you guys can hear the difference that it's made. I have one copyright-free song that's pretty good at exposing these sort of differences. The other two songs are just going to be two copyright-free songs from the HD Tracks 2018 free sampler. And we'll just go through those with the EQ on. Just because they sound much better with the EQ on. And the other thing I forgot to mention, with using something like RU and Equalizer APO, once you get these EQ set where you get a speaker flattened out and everything, you can save that EQ and have it. So if you end up switching out speakers, and use another speaker for a while, and then bring these back in, you can go right back in and pull that EQ up and reapply it. You can save all these profiles. It's such a powerful tool. It's not always necessary, but it's a lot of fun to mess with. So we will go through just a basic song here. I will flip on. It should be pretty obvious when I turn the EQ off, the mids and stuff are going to get much brighter and louder. And then when I turn the EQ back on, the mids should become much more tame and tolerable. So here we go. That's with the EQ off. All right, I'm going to turn the EQ on. I'm going to turn the EQ off. I'm going to turn the EQ back on. Okay, just that short little sample, you should have heard the difference. It's mostly going to be a difference in volume in the mid-range area, but you could really tell having the EQ on kind of brings that mid-range down and gets it under control. So now we'll go into some actual, I'm just going to do two songs that I've kind of been using lately.
We did a movie with you guys.
Here we go. This is with the EQ on.
Yes, guys.
All right, guys, that's gonna be it for the sound demo. Let's move into conclusions. These speakers, like I said, I seen these big old Kenwoods I'd never seen before, and they were so beat up. And even though I think I paid a little too much for them with the condition they were in initially, I think it was worth it. It's taken me a long time beginning to end because with this project and like the Pioneer CS4, it was something I was just kind of doing on the side little by little as I'm just very busy in the summer, and even this last winter ended up being more busy than I thought. So it kind of drug the project out. And a lot of my future projects, hopefully I can get through them a lot quicker. Like these I've had for over a year. The last video was almost a year ago. And I just, like I said, I just do a little at a time when I can. And it feels great now that they're finally done and I can finally listen to them completed. It's one of those things where I'm kind of let down to the point where sometimes the horns were just uncontrollable, and it was to the point where these speakers were really only good for vocals, slower music, jazz, blues, vocals, where you could really let the horn stretch its legs and take advantage of if you really like that, the horn sound. I have not measured these or EQ'd them up to this point. I was waiting to do it in the video, and I was really hoping I could really get some range on that mid horn and bring it, get it under control to where these speakers would become more acceptable for a wider range of music. Without the EQ things like Adele and Billy Joel and I don't know, lots of male and female vocalists sound pretty good through them. Well, some of them sound really good through the horn. The vocals just come out of them horns and just go right through you. It's almost emotional. But you start to turn it up too much, and the horns would just get shouty and out of control and start to hurt your ears, to where now measuring them, EQing them out, and flatten them out, getting them horns under control, kind of cleaning up the bass a little bit, bringing up the upper treble a little bit, has transformed these speakers into a much more listenable speaker. I don't know if I'd still call them a speaker for everything. I think things like I don't know, alternative rock like Metallica or Slipknot or something like that. They do a lot better now with the EQ, but they tend to just still kind of get loud and noisy, to where more delicate vocal based blues, jazz, even opera, a lot of those musics or genres are much more enjoyable. Adele on these with the EQ, her voice just flows out of those mid horns like she's standing in front of you. You can almost feel the horns, the SPL out of the horns is still to the point where it almost feels like she's standing in front of you singing. And that's kind of the one thing I do like about horns, is the horns kind of have a presence. These don't image as well to where you necessarily get that center image, and it's just because the horns are still so direct. But for me, it's okay, because the whether it's male or female vocals I'm getting out of these horns, it is so realistic and rich to me. It's totally okay. I absolutely love listening to, like I said, Billy Joel, Adele, Celine Dion, a lot of these vocal powerhouses, Eric Clapton's, blues rock, Stevie Ray Vaughan, through these. It's just great. So I will get to enjoy them a little bit longer, but from this point on, it's been a long trip with these, but they are finally going to be up for sale. They're not going to be on eBay or anything, because I'm not going to try to ship these tanks. So they'll probably only be available locally here in Iowa, unless you want to drive to get them or something. But Yeah. Any questions or comments, put them down below. If you want me to do something else with them before they sell, let me know as soon as possible. Or if you want to know anything else about them, let me know. But I think that's going to be it for tonight. So if you enjoy this sort of content, I've been reviewing a lot of new speakers, but I want my channel to be more wrapped around taking old speakers. It doesn't necessarily have to be old vintage speakers from the 60s and 70s, just speakers in general, really, that can be torn down, rebuilt, and made into something better. And like these speakers, just like those Pioneer CS10s that would have ended up in the trash, have now been revitalized, and hopefully they'll be around for another 30 years because they're still good speakers. There's no reason to throw them away. They just need a little help, need a little bit of a rebuild, whatever you want to call it. And hopefully I've given these speakers another chance, and hopefully somebody will get a lot of enjoyment out of them, and they'll be around for another, like I said, hopefully another 30, 40 years. So, all right, I think that's going to be it, guys. Like and subscribe, and good night. You want to say anything?
Bye.
All right, bye, guys.